Hey guys, welcome to class. I hope you had a fantastic spring break. Today we are going to be combining together several of the skills that we worked on before spring break. So let me quickly remind you, before spring break we worked on graphing linear equations using that XY chart or table of solutions. And then remember we talked about whether it's steeper, less steep, shifted up, shifted down, rising, falling. So we're going to be looking at all of that today. We also practiced moving equations into function form. So we talked about how we have to get to that form y equals the x term plus or minus the constant. And so those were the two skills we worked on. And today we are going to review those skills and combine them together. Okay, so let's start by reviewing how to move an equation into function form. Okay, so before we do this, we've got to remember what is function form. All right, well, function form is where we always have the y by itself, okay? So you're going to have y equals, and then something x plus or minus the constant. Okay, so it's y equals the x term and then the constant, or the term without the variable. Okay, so our goal is always to isolate y. To get y by itself is our goal. And so whenever we start the problem, like let's look at number 1 together. Notice the directions ask us to move it into function form, and on these first 4 you do not have to graph them. You just have to move them into function form. Okay, so as I look at this here, my goal is to get y by itself. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is to make this addition. You don't have to do this step. You could still get it right without doing it, but I think it's really helpful to make sure that you don't lose that negative sign in front of the 3y. You have to remember that that 3y is negative, and so I think making an addition helps you not lose that negative sign. Okay, so if I want to get y by itself, I have to move away the things that are with the y. And so as I look here, the first thing I want to get rid of is that 2x. Well, because it is positive 2x, to get rid of it, I'm going to subtract 2x. And then I know with equations, to keep them balanced, whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. So the nice thing here is I have eliminated the 2x there. And so on the left side of my equation, I just have negative 3y. Again, don't lose that negative sign. It is negative 3y. On the right side, I have 12 minus 2x. And I can't combine those because they're not like terms. One has an x and one does not. I do want the x term coming first, and so I have to make it addition to be able to switch the order. Remember, you can't switch the order of subtraction, only addition. Once I make it addition, then I can switch and write this as negative 2x plus 12. All right, I am now close, but not quite there. So I right now still have that negative 3 with the y, and I need y to be by itself, okay? So I have to get rid of that negative 3. Well, I'm going to ask the question, what operation is happening between the negative 3 and the y? It's multiplication. I undo multiplication with division. So I'm going to divide by negative 3. And to keep my equation balanced, I have to divide everything by negative 3. When I do that, negative 3 divided by negative 3 is 1, so that cancels out, and I have y, which is awesome. That's my goal, to get y by itself, and so I'm almost there. All right, then negative 2 divided by negative 3. Well, that does not go in evenly, so I'm just going to leave it as a fraction, but I can make it a little bit simpler in that a negative divided by a negative is positive. So I'm going to write this as positive 2/3 x, then plus 12 divided by negative 3 is negative 4. So you can either write this as y equals 2/3 x plus -4, or it could be y equals 2/3 x minus 4. And either of those answers would be just fine. All right, so on number 1 through 4, that's all you have to do is just get the equation in function form, which is y equals the x term and then plus or minus the constant. Okay, so once you finish this video, then you will go back and complete 2, 3, and 4. But we're going to jump ahead right now to number 5 and do that one together because 5 looks a little different than the first 4. All right, let's take a look at number 5 together. You will see that there are a lot of steps to number 5, but we're going to just kind of work it through one step at a time so that you see exactly what to do. The directions say to write the equation in function form if necessary, meaning it could already be in that form. Most of them you're going to have to move. Then graph the equation using a table of solutions, that's an XY chart, and make sure to show all of your work. Okay, so as we look at number 5, step 1 is to move it into function form because we see right now that y is not by itself. Remember, for it to be in function form, it's y equals something x plus or minus something. We're doing y equals the x term plus or minus the constant. Okay, so my goal is to get y by itself. Well, I'm going to go ahead and start by making this addition. Again, you don't have to do that step, but I do think it helps you make sure you don't lose that negative sign. All right, so I need to figure out what is with the y. That's what I need to move away. So I see that 4x. That's what I need to get rid of first since it's positive 4x. I'm going to get rid of it by subtracting 4x from each side. So 4x minus 4x cancels. That's good. That's my goal. And I'm left with negative y, or I'm going to actually make that negative 1y. Okay, remember that 1 is what, when there's not a number, it's 1. Okay, so since it's negative, I'm going to make it negative 1y. And then over on the other side, I have 0 minus 4x. So that's really just like negative 4x there. Okay, I don't have to put that 0. You can, but you don't have to. Okay, now I am close, but I am not quite there. Okay, because I don't want negative y or negative 1y, I want just y, positive y. So I need to ask what operation is between the negative 1 and the y. It's multiplication, so I undo it with division. I'm going to divide by negative 1. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other side. And so I get y equals negative 4 divided by negative 1 is positive 4x. Okay. So there's function form. It's y equals 4x, or if you wanted, you could say y equals 4x plus 0. You can put the plus 0. You don't have to. It doesn't change the problem one way or the other. All right, step 1 done. I got the equation written in function form, and you write it there on the line. All right, the next thing you're going to do is before you graph, before you make your XY chart or anything like that, you are going to make some predictions. So if you remember before spring break, we did that searching for patterns activity, and we talked about like what makes a line steeper, what makes it less steep, what makes it shift up, what makes it shift down, what makes it rise, what makes it fall. And so you are going to make some predictions. Just so you know, you are not getting graded on your predictions. It's just a completion grade that you try. Okay, so you need to do this step, but just know that this is not part of your grade. This is just a completion that you try to make a prediction. All right, so as we look at this equation, if you remember the coefficient to the x, which in this case is 4, that is what impacts the steepness and whether it rises or falls. Okay, so if the coefficient, which in this case is 4, remember that if it is positive, it rises. If it is negative, it falls. So because this is positive 4, I'm going to go ahead and guess that this line is going to rise. Then the steepness is based on what that number is. So if the absolute value of the number is greater than 1, it's steeper. If it is less than 1, so in other words, like 1/2, 1/4, 1/3, 2/3, so if the absolute value of it is less than 1, then it is less steep. And if it were 1 or equal to 1, okay, then it would have the same steepness. So 4 is obviously bigger than 1, so I'm going to guess that this is going to be steeper. All right. Then the constant, which in this case is 0, is what talks about the shifting. Remember that if the constant is positive or plus something, then it's going to shift up. If the constant is negative, then it's going to shift down. If the constant is 0, it is not going to shift at all, okay? And so since this is 0, I'm gonna guess that it is not shifted. All right, now at the end of the problem, we'll go ahead and check our predictions, but for right now, all you're doing is making your best guess. Okay, let's move down to the next step, where we are going to complete the XY chart. So remember that in the XY chart, we can pick what we want for X. You need to pick some positives and some negatives. And so for most problems, the easiest things for you to pick are going to be -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And you can use that last row. You don't have to. You only have to do 5. So sorry, I put an extra row there. All right. Now, remember we talked about when you have a fraction, sometimes there's different numbers that are easier to pick. It's much easier to pick multiples of the denominator. But when you have this whole number like 4 there as the coefficient, go ahead and just pick -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. All right, so now I need to plug those numbers into my equation, and I need to show my work for at least 3 points. So I've got 4 times -2. I'm going to plug in -2 for X. 4 times -2 is -8. Okay, so when X is -2, Y is -8. Then I'm going to plug in -1. I get Y equals -4. Then I'm going to plug in 0. And 4 times 0 is 0. Once you've shown your work for 3, you are welcome to do the rest in your head, or you can show your work if you need to. So when X is 1, 1 times 4 is 4. When X is 2, 4 times 2 is 8. All right, so now I've completed my table, and I need to plot these points. So the first point, -2, -8, does not actually fit on the graph that I've been given. Okay, well, that's okay. Because remember we talked about how the points are not your answer. The points help you find your answer. Your answer is the line. So as long as you have enough information to make a line, it's okay if not every single point fits on your graph. Okay, so let's go ahead and start by plotting the second point, which is -1, -4. Remember you move right or left and then up or down. Then I'm going to plot 0, 0. That's right at the origin. Then I'm going to plot 1, 4. And then unfortunately the last point does not fit as well, okay? 2, 8 does not quite fit on the graph. It's just beyond the graph, so you could still kind of extend your graph and plot it if you want, but you don't have to because these 3 points give you enough information to make your line. And again, the line is your answer, not the points. The points just help you get to your answer. So I'm going to make a nice long straight line through those points. I'm going to put an arrow on either end to show that that line goes on forever. All right, now that I've actually graphed the line, I'm going to compare this to the parent function again. Just so you know, this bottom box is what will be graded for accuracy, okay? So as I look at this line, if it helps you, you are welcome to draw the parent function into your graph to have that to help compare it to. This line I see is definitely steeper. It is not shifted because it goes through 0, 0 or the origin. And it is rising because as I follow the line from left to right, it points up. And so I can look back and see how I did in my predictions, and I actually did a great job at those match. If they match, awesome, good job, you made some really good predictions. If they don't, that is okay. Remember, your predictions are not getting graded. Only this after graphing box is what will get graded for accuracy. The before grading box is just a completion score that you try to make a prediction. Okay? All right, so you can see there are multiple steps. You're going to first move it into function form, then make predictions, then fill out your XY chart, then plot the points and graph your line, and then talk about how it compares to the parent function afterwards. All right, so what you are going to do now, hopefully seeing an example helps, is you're going to go back and on number 2, 3, and 4, you are just moving those into function form. You don't have to graph them. But then number 6 through the rest, you are moving it into function form, then graphing it and making those observations about how it compares to the parent function. All right, hope you have a great day.